Welcome to the I Now Pronounce You Divorced podcast, where we have three award-winning family law attorneys dive into intriguing topics like divorce, military divorce, custody and visitation, trust and estate planning, and all things family law. Join us as we provide a comprehensive viewpoint through the eyes of our experts and guests, aiming to educate and soothe our listeners. Get ready to tune in because I Now Pronounce You Divorced starts right now.
Hi, I'm Charles Hatley, and this Malone Hatley PC's podcast, I Now Pronounce You Divorced. Today I'm joined by Dan Cuneo and Rebecca Malone to talk about something that we all kind of like to look at. It's always very interesting, and that is celebrity divorces, right? I like watching and reading almost in a tabloid style of them airing their dirty laundry and saying, man, why would anybody ever say this stuff in a public setting? Especially like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, the Angelina Jolie Brad Pitt case, and even in cases where there wasn't a divorce, like the Jay-Z and Beyonce thing where there was a fight in the elevator. Just getting to watch all of these domestic strifes happen is sometimes fun. So I want to throw it to you, Rebecca. Kind of what is a high profile divorce, and why is that a little bit different than maybe a normal divorce?
Right. So it's all about the visibility, right? If you file anything in Virginia at the circuit court level, it is a public record. So if I go in and file a divorce complaint and air out all your dirty laundry and all your secrets and all the terrible things you've ever done, right? Anybody can go to the courthouse and pull that file and then publish it anywhere, right? It's a public record. And so there's a lot at risk when you're talking about someone who relies on their reputation for their career or, for whatever. And so that it's true for celebrities. It's true for just very wealthy people, very high profile people, athletes, anybody who's in the public eye doesn't necessarily want all of the dirties and uglies to come out, right? I remember when Tiger Woods' whole thing first started, right? There was a very, very weird article about he tried to get in the car and drive away, and she threw a golf club at the car or something, broke the window. It was just a very bizarre story. And they tried to write it off as oh, they just had a little argument, nothing to see here, don't worry about it. But he was drunk and there was property damage, there was all kinds of stuff. And so everything just sort of ballooned from there. And then that was all you heard about for the next few months. Most celebrities and most high profile people are going to want to try to avoid that because it made it nearly impossible for either of them to go out in a public setting without being hassled about what was going on in their private lives and being asked really personal questions and having horrible things posted in the paper about them. Most of those clients are going to seek either a mediation or alternative dispute resolution. They're going to try to kind of keep things under wraps as much as they possibly can, so that they can avoid that. Because usually, even if you're the one that is starting it and you're saying the other side is doing everything wrong, you're going to get all that negative attention right back too.
You're exactly right. Pleadings become a tit for tat thing. Mm-hmm. And Dan, Rebecca brought us something interesting. You want to keep it out of the public eye as much as possible. And that had me start thinking about Jeff Bezos, right? When Jeff Bezos got divorced, it was not hundreds of dollars or thousands or millions. It was billions of dollars being traded, billions of dollars in assets, right? It wasn't cash, but billions of dollars in assets being traded back and forth. And all of a sudden, their divorce was done in 90 days or something like that. Can you kind of talk us through why somebody would spend billions of dollars when, of course, if you took it to court to fight it, you would spend less, and he probably would have been able to keep more of his assets?
And a lot of this is speculation because we didn't represent him, but just looking at it from just a business side or just from a practitioner side, when you're talking to clients, especially when you have these high profile ones, it can have an effect, that the ripple effect, right? Like going back to what Rebecca was talking about with Tiger Woods, he had a lot of endorsements that dropped him. I mean, there was only one, if I remember correctly, it was Nike that kind of stood with him. So he took a financial hit outside of what was going to happen within the realm of the divorce arena. But you're talking about business and then your reputation, which there's money attached to that because that's, you go out and get those contracts and things like that. And then if you talk about the Bezos, I'm sure that the attorneys that he hired said, listen, there's you have family involved. You don't want to drag everyone through the waters there. You don't want to air out any of your dirty laundry that could affect not just you and your assets, but you also have the stock price of Amazon that would have been affected by that. There's all these ancillary issues that us as non really high profile or non celebrity don't really think about, because you have potential effects that would happen. So in the Bezos case, if they would have aired out some issues that might have had an effect on the stock price, that might have had effect on the sale of the company, if that was even an option at the time, or maybe there's other property that they had that they didn't want to have disclosed. And the more that you can keep kind of behind closed doors, or at least have concealed, I feel that that's an easier path to facilitate settlement, because then you're just dealing between the parties and trying to really keep it out of the public eye, because everybody has an opinion and opinions are going to start swaying. I know just with clients in general, it's always, okay, you can listen, but try to keep that inner circle inner and not have too many people in your ear, because then it just convolutes and can really make the draw out the process, and you're just spending more time and more money when you don't need to. And then just the emotional toll and stress that it can take on you. And that, I'm sure, was a factor that was discussed in the Bezos case too, is listen, you have a family, there's kids involved, you are of a certain class where everyone is going to be interested as far as what's going on, what's behind these closed doors. And the more that we can kind of keep that curtain closed and not allow many to peek behind it, that I think the better it is for all parties involved. So with the Bezos case, I was actually really surprised at how quick that they're able to turn things around. And I don't know if this is something to just the strength of the relationship, not necessarily the marriage, but the relationship and understanding. The more that we can resolve ourselves, the better off both of us are going to be. Our families don't have to go through this. Our kids don't have to go through this. We can save on our property, as opposed to having things valuated, getting all these experts involved, spending all this money on attorneys, because I'm sure they had multiple law firms involved that were assisting in different aspects and phases of the case. And to me, that's just smart decisions, whether, again, if you're thinking from family, you're thinking in a business perspective, it just makes sense. The more that you can try to be somewhat amicable, the better off everyone's going to be.
Yeah, when you're talking about Jeff Bezos, I started thinking about Bill Gates, and his was relatively quick, but there was some dirty laundry that started getting aired there, and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ben Affleck, and I was like, man, you got to stay away from nannies.
True.
You just watch out for nannies when you get to that point.
Mhm.
High profile divorces are really neat to watch. I mean, it's terrible that somebody's going through that, but we all like to watch it, voyeuristic view of it. But just because you're not high profile doesn't mean that you're not high profile in your little sphere of influence. And so the reason that I like looking at high profile divorces, and I think it's very analogous to each one of our clients, is within everybody's life, you're high profile to somebody. You may be high profile to your children, you may be high profile to your parents, high profile to your employees or coworkers, to your boss. So, Rebecca, how does kind of not airing your dirty laundry for celebrities apply
Mhm.
to everybody?
Sure. So the more that you can keep to yourself, the better. I mean, that's across the board. That doesn't matter how many assets you have or anything else. Of course, you have to put enough in the paperwork to be able to pursue the claims that you have and to validly have a basis for them. But you don't have to put every single dirty, ugly thing that's ever happened between the two of you out there. The more you can stay off of like social media, the better off your case is going to be, because the first thing, or one of the first things the other side is going to do, is ask you to produce all of your social media. And if you have all these horrible posts out there saying, my spouse is so terrible and they did this and they did that and blah, 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 and, I hate them and whatever, it's only going to hurt your case, right? It doesn't actually get the message that you're trying to communicate when you say, oh, the other side's so terrible. The court's going to look at that and say, you didn't even have the discretion, to keep certain things to yourself. We have to imagine that you're probably talking negatively about them in front of your kids. You're probably talking negative about them in other settings. And so that's not going to be beneficial to you in your case, right? You're going to be less likely to get primary custody. You're going to be less likely to be, found to be innocent in the whole situation. So So those are just some of the ways that it can impact. I mean, of course, if you're someone that is in the military, then having to deal with someone calling up your command and making up crazy accusations, that can have a huge impact on your career and your future in the military. And so there's all kinds of ways that it kind of comes back around to bite you, because now the person who's called up and made all these reports and caused maybe a demotion, caused somebody to lose their job, well, guess what? Now there's less assets. Now there's less income. Now there's, you're not really truly getting a benefit when you behave that way in your case. And so for all parties involved, it's usually best to say, keep it between you and your attorney, right? And only put out there what you need to and you have to for the benefit of your case. But don't just go around kind of spouting off about whatever else is going on.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. The proliferation of social media, we sometimes forget that social media is public, and unless I'm not sure if there's a privacy setting strong enough to hide things that you post online, right? You could post something nasty online and have all of your security settings set to where nobody can see it. And then one of your friends likes it or comments on it who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have their security settings or their privacy settings set the right way. And now the whole world can see their response to your post. And it's nothing that you ever intended. We had a case where, and this is a little bit of a reverse, where our client was married to somebody who was very, very, very high up in the military. I mean, we're talking, in leadership roles within the military. And he had been charged for a sexual crime overseas with a minor and had successfully hidden that from the military.
Mm.
And that was the reason for the divorce, right? It was absolutely the square reason for the divorce. And she was trying her best to be amicable about it. And then he decided no, he was going scorched earth because he didn't think she had the guts to say it. Because as soon as she would say this allegation, it was proven. Like he was found guilty. He hid it. I don't know how he did it, but he would have lost his job. The military is not going to take that, right? What he did, he was out. All retirement gone, everything gone. And it was almost a dare to her. Look, I'm going to say all these bad things about you. I dare you to come down to my level. Dan, what do you do in that situation where the other side knows that if you say it, it's more than mutually assured destruction. They're going to attack you knowing if you say the one thing you got, you both get nothing.
That's hard because if you're in the client's shoes, there's only so much, just even as a human, that you can take. But if you're willing to kind of look through it from the lens of how can I best protect myself, and if there's kids involved, how can I shield them from some of this, or at least lead by example, then hopefully you can develop thicker skin as proceedings move on. But I've been in not as an extreme situation as what you described, but it's, having the other side just try to berate and post negative things. And, my client, their feelings were hurt and they want to respond, but let's look at this bigger picture. If you engage in this, then we're going to increase your fees. We're just going to create all this noise that you don't really need to create. The process is going to get delayed or strung on. And then just the emotional toll that's going to take on you. And at the end of the day, what is your end goal? Because I always want to talk to clients when they first come in, what is your goal? And let's try to stay on that path. Sometimes you have to deviate because things happen. But, if the goal is to try to preserve the assets and try to get as much as you can for your client, engaging or reciprocating in these types of behavior isn't always in the best interest. And it's usually not. Judges, at least in my experience in the different states that I practice in, have zero tolerance when situations like this happen. You're wasting money, you're wasting time, and even more importantly, you're wasting the court's time, because then they have to sometimes get involved, and that irks the judge. And the last thing you want to do is have the person who's making decisions on your case upset. You want them to be in a good mood, and you want to show them that you're the one that's taking the high road, because some of these things, there may be some truth to it, but they're heightened because of just emotions that are happening. But you just want to continue to try to take that high road. And especially if there's kids involved, you don't want your kids seeing posts about either parent really that are negative, but especially if you're reciprocating, eventually the children may see that and they just gonna be like, why did mom say that about that? Or why is dad saying that about mom? What's going on? And then that can just have an emotional effect. And then you're really going back to that ripple effect. It's just, you're affecting more people than the two that are going through that process. And so at the end of the day, it's just best to not engage, because it blows up into something much bigger than it needs to ever be.
And I'll stick with you, Dan. So, we talked a little bit about posting things online. Let's say that the other side is just posting and posting and posting, and your client is getting emails from their boss saying, "Look, man, this has got to stop." Like, you're an outside salesperson, and the clients are seeing this, and this is going to directly impact your job. What tools do you have as an attorney to make the other side stop posting these crazy things?
Sure. I would suggest one, if both sides are represented, have your attorney essentially send a cease and desist letter to the other side and advising them, effective me, please have your client refrain from posting anything about my client online. And if they can, remove some of those posts that have been put out there. And if that doesn't work, then your next step is a little extreme, but you need to file the motion with the court and restrain them from doing that. And so you get a restraining order, because at the end of the day, not only is that affecting your reputation, which is then affecting your ability to work, and then it's affecting the company you're working with, but also is now getting into the arena of harassment. And it's a continually posting of whatever it is, factual or non-factual, but it's how it's being received. And it's having all these negative effects to where if the other side continues to do that, then the court should hand down remedies that could be either striking pleadings or paying attorney's fees or paying more in fines, or even restraining them by putting them in some type of incarceration, whether it be in jail for a few weeks just to show you can't do this. But something that this has to stop, because the more that it continues on, you're affecting more than just yourself. And then the courts need to take that into consideration. But if it can stop by just sending a letter to the other side, then great. But you also want to see whatever was posted to being taken down, because if you lose your job due to these posts, then as Rebecca mentioned earlier, there's those effects to where you're hurting not just yourself, but both of you, because you're affecting the assets, whether it's paying support or receiving support, that's not there. And then there's other issues that arise from that, because then the court could look at that, well, was a voluntary reduction in income, and we're going to hold you to that same level. So there's just so many tangential and ancillary things that come from this, that if you can just try to head it off at the pass in the early stages, the better off you'll be.
Absolutely. And, for part 2, Rebecca, I kind of want to talk to you about, since the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case was kind of about a divorce, but mostly about the defamation that occurred during the divorce process, these things that were being said that were untrue, that ultimately hurt, Mr. Depp's earning potential. And to some extent, I think that the ruling also included something with Amber Heard hurting her earning potential.
Mm-hmm.
How these claims can morph from a divorce into a civil suit. And, getting ready to take our break for part 2, I'll tell a story about an attorney that I had heard of. He wrote a book on it. So he wrote a book. This is nothing private. That during his divorce, he's a very well-respected attorney. During his divorce, his wife went and worked with a local therapist to have the children say that he sexually assaulted them. And so he shows up to court with the kids claiming that he's sexually assaulting them. And he blows up. Anyway, they filed criminal charges against him. They went through all this stuff. He was eventually put in jail over this sexual assault. He tried to escape jail, which, that doesn't help. His license was suspended. I'm not sure if he was officially disbarred, but his license was suspended over this. And he filed a malpractice suit that he ultimately lost, and had to file a malpractice suit against the malpractice company that ultimately lost the case. I mean, it just went on and on and on and on. And this was not a high profile person, but everybody in that town knows about this case. Right. And ultimately, through all of the fighting that he did, he proved it was all a lie. Mm-hmm. He proved that mom and the children went and worked with this therapist, and it was all a lie told to the court. He was wrongfully imprisoned, wrongfully had his bar license suspended. All of these things happened to this man, and he is still recovering his reputation now, however many decades later after these allegations came out. And he wrote a book, and I'll look it up before part 2, because it's a really interesting book talking about the hardships that divorce can really cause. So we'll talk about that next time. This is part 1, talking about high profile divorces and how everybody in your sphere of influence is high profile to somebody. So thank you for joining us today on I Now Pronounce You Divorce with Malone Hatley PC, where we truly are your partner through divorce and estate planning. And if you or someone you know is going through a tough time with their family, give us a call and see the difference a partner can make for them.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you want more informational content, please be sure to subscribe and join us on all major social media platforms, including YouTube. Stay connected for more exciting updates and tips.